Good morning to all you whiskey tubers out there. I am going to say welcome to another episode of Life and Whiskey. As always, I'm Jordan, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I am out of new whiskeys to review. At this point, I've reviewed something like 260 whiskeys, something like that. And so, actually, this weekend, my wife and I are going to go on a trip. Potentially we'll come up with some new whiskey when we get done with that trip. We'll see. No guarantees, but I've uploaded all the videos and put those on not Rumble, Bitchute. So I have no more videos to upload there. If you're watching this on YouTube, I don't know, it's 2024, 2025, who knows? But it is currently second week of March 2023 as I record this. And what I thought I would do, I watched the Bourbon Junkies, Dan and Sean, this weekend. They did a nice video that I thought was a great idea where it was kind of their whiskey journey. Now I'm going to do it a bit differently than they did, and I think they got it from somebody else as well, one of their friends. But I'm going to kind of walk you through how I got to this point here. The one thing I didn't do was like look up when I started my YouTube channel, but I believe it was pretty early. I'm looking to see if I have it here. When I did it, it was early in 2020. Yeah, here, 2/21/2020. That was video number 2. So February of 2020 was when I started my YouTube channel. And I'm going to have my notes down here to kind of take a look at. So 2020, this is 2023. So I've been doing this for 3 years. I'll kind of walk you through my whiskey journey, how I got here, highlighting some of the bottles that got me there. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. But, some things that are kind of important as far as like flavors and experiences and things like that, that kind of got me on my way to get me to where I am here. And then after this video, the next video I'm going to do is kind of my whiskey journey as far as like exploratory things that kind of got me, bottles that got me into whiskey. So that's what the Bourbon Junkies did. Dan and Sean and whoever they were mimicking, they were talking about like what were the key bottles that got you in. So like what was your first bottle? What was the bottle that you kind of started you on your whiskey journey? What bottles do you continue to hunt? What were what was the bottle that bumped you up into that next category? Things like that. I'm going to hit some of those points in this, but I'm just going to walk you through my whiskey journey, start to finish here. So, the very starting point of whiskey was, potentially problematic. When I was in high school, my mom and stepdad, they had like 2 bottles of whiskey on the top of the fridge that were always there. My stepdad, every great once in a while, he likes to have a little taste of something, and I mean like a capful. And so he had Jameson and there was a bottle of Jim Beam on there. So when I was in high school, I would sneak a little sip. And I mean, I was not a drinker in high school. I was not a drinker in college where I just went out, drank all the time, whatever. I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I was drunk between high school and undergraduate college. It just wasn't something that I was particularly into. Sure, I would have a beer every now and again and whatever, but I just was not into the drinking scene. Number one, I was broke, and so I liked to keep my money mainly for hunting. And so, anyways, I would start off. Now, this is not the bottle. We had the regular Jim Beam white label, but I have this bottle of Jim Beam Repeal Batch just to kind of remind me and as a placeholder of the whiskey that I had. Now, here's something interesting that most of you would probably go, oh my God, that's disgusting. I remember I would take a shot not a shot. I'd just take a swig out of the bottle, and then I'd take a swig off the milk jug in the refrigerator. And it was funny. The alcohol in the whiskey would take, and it wouldn't curdle the milk, but it would somehow interact with the lactose that was in the milk, and it would just be like this sugar bomb going down. Now I didn't mix the two. It was like I'd take a swig and then I'd have a milk chaser, more or less. And that was kind of my first couple of interactions with whiskey, along with a sip here or there throughout my childhood or whatever. I don't even remember, but I do remember the bottle of Jim Beam in the refrigerator, or sorry, on top of the refrigerator growing up. And so that was like my first kind of like boom, something that I went back to, because I'd take a sip off of that, I don't know, every 6 months to a year, I don't know, something like that. Then fast forward, now I do not have this bottle because I just finished it the other day, but I went to college, went to graduate school. Started getting, there was this, the Back 40 beer club at the Blue Moose in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. I went to graduate school at UND in Grand Forks, and they had this club where they had, I don't know, 60 different beers or something like that. So I started down the beer journey, checked all that stuff out. Was never really into whiskey at that point. Moved to Devil's Lake, North Dakota after graduate school, and I cheap alcohol, right? So like me and my roommate were drinking cheap beer, and then we'd go out fishing, and I started drinking 7 and 7, but it was like the cheapest version of a 7 and 7. My roommate would drink Black Velvet and Coke, Diet Coke, and so shout out to Josh. And I would drink my 7 and 7, but I would go to Walmart and get like the 68-cent, 2 or 88-cent, I don't remember, 2-liter bottles of the Sam's Club version, whatever the great value stuff, whatever the Walmart branding was, of either Mountain Dew or 7-Up. And then I would go and get a bottle of R&R, so the old Rich and Rare, and I would buy, gosh, I want to say that was like $5 or $6 for a bottle of that. And I'd take my coffee mug. We'd go out fishing for walleye from the shorelines there, and I'd mix like a mug of 50-50 whiskey and either 7-Up or Mountain Dew, or it was Mountain Lightning, and I don't remember what the 7-Up version was. But so I started drinking my mixers then. And again, not very often. This was not a daily thing. This wasn't even an every weekend thing. But that was like my next phase of whiskey, was drinking some mixers. Then I moved to Jamestown, North Dakota. And I remember we were at the bar, IDK's there, and it was just like, oh, let's get a shot of something, right? So we got a shot. Actually, scratch all that. We got to back up the story just a little bit. In 2006, I was just outside of Fairbanks, Alaska, in a small community called Esther, at the Eagle. Yasha Jacob, Jake, he was a Muscovite from Moscow there, that he was drinking like the cheapest scotch he could get. Now, if you've ever been to Alaska, you'll know that everything's super expensive. So like the cheapest shot of like bottom shelf, I don't even know what it was, scotch was like $7, something like that. And I remember drinking that with him, and that was like my first introduction to scotch, and it was okay. I mean, it was some kind of blended horrific stuff. I don't even know what it was, but he and I were drinking that. So that there is a small scotch interlude there. But coming back to Jamestown, I remember we got some Bullet Rye, and I don't even know why I started thinking I liked rye whiskey so much, but I was like, let's try that. And so really, really enjoyed it. I think at the time, Bullet might have been MGP rye, still might be MGP rye. And me and some buddies over the course of the next month ended up drinking the entire bottle they had, and then they didn't have it anymore. And I was like, ooh, who do I need to talk to make sure you get that in? And they bought an entire case of, because that's how they did it, Bullet. And I was like, I will keep drinking it if you have it. So they had it. Of course, when you buy from a bar, you're spending 10 times the price of what it would have been just to go down to the store and buy a bottle anyways. But that was my introduction to both rye and when I started drinking whiskey more routinely. Next, after that, because my buddy, shout out to Jim, knew that I liked rye, he came over on our first Good Living first Good Living night, which is when he and I would get together. We'd make some incredible meal of some sort, and then we do something, and inevitably the evening ended with sitting around BSing and drinking. And that night, so I just bought a new bow in preparation of going on a North Dakota Badlands mule deer spot and stock hunt in October. So he and we were out flinging arrows. Then we had a nice meal, and then we decided to lay into this Pendleton Rye, the 1910, and we ended up killing the entire bottle. And then, because at the time I was making some wine, I was like, hey man, let's give this wine a shot. And we drank an entire milk jug of wine that I was making. And that kind of cemented rye whiskey in my mind forevermore. And so I remember looking at the Breakout Premium Rye. Now, I've seen this on the shelves since then, and that was like an incredible amount of money. It was like $40, to a poor guy at the time. Like $40 for a bottle of whiskey was just mind blowing. And nobody was drinking it. So our liquor store in town would cycle through stuff. They were really, really good about getting in new things, having reasonable prices, letting people sample stuff. Some of the best nights I had, I think it was on Wednesday nights, they would have a free sample night, and they'd bring a vendor in of some sort, a distributor, whether it was beer or liquor, and they would just start letting you try stuff. And so I got to try a lot of new things. But the same store, because they couldn't move this whiskey, they had it marked down to like, I say it was like 14 or $18, something insane like that. So I started buying that. I bought, 3, 4 bottles of that at one point. But that's when I started into rye. Then from North Dakota, I moved to Montana, and I lived in Whitefish for a while with my now wife. And Whitefish is a spendy little ski town, and they didn't have anything for squat there. And so that was the first time that I tried Old Overholt. It was the cheapest rye whiskey I could find. I had it cemented in my mind. I was firmly a rye guy at that point. And so I did not have the bottled and bond version. I just had the regular version that should have been $7, $8, $9 at the time, but I remember paying 12 or 17 or something like that, and that was back in like 2014. But Old Overholt, which really got me into Old Overholt, really, really liked it a lot. And so I continued down my rye journey. Then in the valley there, in the Flathead Valley and around Glacier National Park and stuff, my wife and I were still into the brewery portion of things, so a lot of microbrews. Most of these bottles, these growlers you see behind me, are from that phase of life, so I wasn't like super into whiskey yet, but I really did enjoy different spirits, and but microbrews were really kind of like what we were into. So you see stuff up here on the wall that is from kind of when I lived in Montana and Washington, 2014, 15, kind of pushing into 2016. Really, really was into the beer scene, like just trying everything under the sun, finding different varieties and different breweries that I really liked. But in the Flathead Valley, so just outside of Glacier, let's see, does it tell you? In Coram, Montana, there is the Glacier Distilling. we tried a lot of their stuff, a whole bunch of varieties. They were a fairly new distillery at the time. Um, and so really enjoyed that stuff. And then the other one, and they have just really nice bottles. And then the other distillery that was kind of local was Whistling Andy's over in Big Fork here. And this hibiscus rum was one of our favorites. And they also had a corn whiskey that I really liked. And I think nowadays you can get bourbon, all kinds of stuff. Like both distilleries are just doing the general distillery thing where they have a huge line of both clear and aged spirits and whiskeys and all kinds of stuff. But Whistling Andy's, the hibiscus rum is phenomenal if you ever get a chance. And Glacier Distilling, I don't remember all that much about them, but they had, there was nothing bad being produced there, and it was just nice. And so that was kind of like the next phase of my journey. And then we ended up moving to Washington. For a very short period of time. We still did a lot of brewery stuff then, especially when my wife was in school with all of her classmates. We'd go out to the breweries and all that fun stuff. But I came across this product called, and you've heard me mention it many, many, many times, John Jacob, their rye. It was like a 95% malted rye mash bill. I mean, it is just, or sorry, here it is 80% rye, 20% malted barley, um, pot distilled. They've had numerous bottlings of it, and as you can see, different styles and stuff like that. I've never disliked any of it. It was always delicious. So this is like one of my favorite rye whiskeys I've ever had. Luckily, I still have family that lives in Washington, and once in a while I can get them to sneak me a bottle when they come to visit. But just really, really love this from Mischief Distilling Distillery, I guess. But John Jacob, you've heard me talk about it many times, but really got into that. But we were living in Spokane, Washington at the time, and so that's where Dry Fly is. Dry Fly was just starting to get really big at the time. In fact, they had just put in a new bottling line when we lived there to allow them to do like 3 or 4 times the amount. I forget how many thousands of cases they did a year, but it was like 12,000 or 40,000 cases, something like that, where for a micro distillery, they were doing quite a bit of stuff. But I also met a guy that owned and operated the Tin Bender Distillery, and we went and talked to him and just kind of explored everything. And I wanted to have my own craft distillery. So there was a course being offered. I think Distilling University, something like that, was offering a distilling course. I took that. I was like, I don't know, $2,000 or something like that. And they were working in conjunction with Tin Bender to do the hands-on portion of the course. And so I found that out like a month or two in advance. So I went down to Tin Bender to talk to Paul. And I was like, hey, man, I just want to come. I'll volunteer. I just want to get some hands-on experience. Paul was awesome. Him and his wife ran the place. I just gave him as much free labor as he wanted and as much hands-on experience. So bottling, distilling, kind of seeing what he was doing. He answered all my questions. He was just an open book. And so Tin Bender played a big part of my whiskey journey. In fact, what was it? It was probably right around 2020 or 2021. Paul decided he was not going to. He had a couple of unfortunate incidences where the building he was in with his distillery, a car plowed into it, made the building unsafe, and then he just couldn't get another spot to open a distillery, and so he decided to sell all of his distilling equipment. He made everything himself by trade at the time. He was a stainless steel sanitary welder, and so he made all of his distilling equipment. And then I opted in like 20 or 21, I don't remember, to purchase his distillery. He set me up with a great deal, to buy all the equipment and stuff. And I was I was trying to find a place here in town to have a distillery, and I couldn't find a building that was like affordable or anything like that. And then the pandemic hit, and prices on rents doubled. It went from like $2,000 to $4,000. Um, and so my hopes and dreams of owning my own distillery and being my own distiller um, just kind of fizzled out at that point for the time being. And so I shelved my ideas on a distillery. But I decided at the time, my hunting partner came out before that. And sorry, after making that distilling course or taking that distilling course, I tried to find partners and people to open a distillery. I tried looking at like the Black Hills before the Black Hills exploded, even to the point it is now. I would have been one of the first distilleries there in like 2016. Man, I just couldn't find the people willing to take the chance on me, and the banks just they never offer you a good deal on stuff like this. So missed an opportunity there. Kind of kept the dream alive as we moved around Wyoming and looked for places and things to do, and it just never came to fruition for me. Um, so there was 5-6 years kind of with that distillery mindset going on, um, and I think it was I don't remember the gentleman's name, but Dominion Distilling north of Spokane. I forget the name of the town. Starts with a C. Uh, Anyways, he invented this Gatlin still. Check it out. All copper Gatlin still design patented. Went up and talked to him for a while. He was another guy just like Paul. He and Paul were actually friends, knew each other. Answered all my questions, had amazing whiskey, and that like really cemented it. Like, I'm gonna do this kind of thing. Anyways, moved to Wyoming. Again, distilleries didn't work out. And so keeping with that, my hunting partner comes bird hunting, and we're always talking about like, oh man, here, and he was always a bourbon fan and had been to Kentucky, used to go to the Kentucky Derby all the time. Maker's Mark Mile, huge Maker's Mark fan. In fact, this Maker's Mark poster and that Maker's Mark poster over there are from him. And knew a lot about the whiskey and all that stuff. So we went from like beer and cigars at the end of our bird hunts to a beer, and then when we got back, some whiskeys and stuff like that. And so I remember he and I went to the liquor store, and we picked out, I don't know, 4 or 5 bottles of whiskey to try, and just kind of enjoy and whatnot. And if you go back on any of my channels and you watch my first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 videos that I had, with the exception of the whiskey under $10 reviews, the actual like individual bottle reviews that I did, those were all bottles that I had on hand at the time from when he came, and we were just like pulling stuff off the shelf. Neither of us were like really into the whiskey scene. Neither of us really knew exactly what we were looking for or anything like that. And then that was like what really started me down the whiskey journey. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I found Daniel and Rex and the Whiskey Tribe and the Whiskey Vault at that point in time. Started looking at their stuff, and I'm like, oh man, that sounds awesome, right? So that was really when I started to get deep and intensely into the whiskey scene. And also my hunting partner, same thing. So he probably has a collection that rivals mine, and probably has several bottles a bit higher up on the shelf than even what I have. But started down, the analysis of whiskey and really getting deep into that. And then from Rex and Daniel, they mentioned the old monkey shoulder. And that was how I started into the Scotch scene. I still was not a huge fan of Scotch at the time. I didn't really know the difference between like blended Scotch and blended malts and then single malts and all that stuff. I didn't understand the regions. I just knew that every time I had ever had scotch, including when I was in Alaska, if I had a sip of scotch or a drink of scotch, even if that was the only drink I had, I would wake up feeling hungover the next morning. And so I stayed away from scotch because I was like, I don't know what the deal is with scotch, but I'm just not a fan. I feel like crap the next day. Monkey Shoulder was my gateway into um, the Scotch scene where that was no longer true. Um, as a blended malt from Speyside, you get that really nice butterscotch, sweet caramel, all those great flavors that are in there. And so that was how I got into Scotch. I coupled that with my rye collection and my bourbon collection, and I started on the bottom shelves of all the different varieties of whiskey. If you follow through my videos in sequence, you'll see that I'm a poor dude that can't really afford a ton of stuff, and so when you're paying out of your own pocket for absolutely everything, I was trying to hit bottles under $40 at the time in 2020, and there were a ton of things. Now since then, prices have started to creep up. Like a bottle that might have been $7 might be $10 today. So just in 3 years' time, the price on stuff is bumped up. During the pandemic, people had money from the government stimulus checks and nothing but time on their hands. So they were watching whiskey videos on YouTube and stuff. Like when I started my YouTube channel, I think there was maybe 5 other channels that had any notoriety out there, and now there's hundreds because everybody saw what somebody was doing and they were sitting at home. They're like, I can drink, I can talk, I can do whatever. And so, like, it was just an unfortunate turn of events that right as I was trying to get things going, everybody else jumped in within 3 months as well. But because of supply chain issues and then the demand just going off the charts, prices on whiskey have started to creep up quite a bit. Um, and so that really limited what I could purchase and how often I could purchase and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do the working man's version of, you know, getting into whiskey. Like I bought tons of bottles, as many as I could, for as cheap as I could, trying to find the hidden gems that were in there that I was like, you know what, this might only be $10, but it's totally worth it if you like these flavors. And that's when I really developed my idea of what I wanted this channel to be, which is a review of whiskey to help you maximize your dollars so that you don't have to go buy 200 plus bottles of whiskey to find 5 that you can enjoy and at a price point that you can feel comfortable with. And so um, that was kind of how the whole whiskey scene started for me. And then I think it was 2 years ago, um, my wife and I watched Parks and Rec after on YouTube. I was kind of going down the rabbit hole. I saw a video of Parks and Rec, and Ron Swanson became my hero. I was like, that character is everything I could imagine as far as agreeing with principles, values, and whatever else. And so I just, like so many other people, fell in love with Ron Swanson. And then because of that, my wife bought a bottle of Lagavulin 16 for me for, I believe it was my birthday. It might have been Christmas, but I believe it was my birthday in 21, something like that. And that was my first dive into peated scotch. I have not looked back since then. I have 30 bottles, 40 bottles of peated scotches, varieties. Um, and then we kind of went down the scotch rabbit hole, mostly focused on peated. But like I got some Bunnahabhains and other things that are not peated that we also enjoy quite a bit as well. But my next phase, now that I've spent all this money and have all this whiskey and whatever else, is now I'm hunting the most select bottles of things that sound interesting that I see other people review. And I'm like, ooh, I really want to take the time, money, and energy to find those bottles and only those bottles. I'm not going to continue to just purchase random bottles now off the shelf. And then I got you see me reference my Excel spreadsheet often. I got everything categorized and listed and documented. The next phase is going to be highlighting those bottles out of everything I've already had that are going to be my repeat buyers, that are things that I'm like, okay, I'm no longer just going to randomly be buying stuff, but I want to make sure I always have a bottle of this on the shelf. And so that will be one of my next videos that I do. In fact, that might be my next video, even though I know that's not what I said. I'm going to write that down because I like that I like that idea. And so that kind of brings me to where I'm at right now, where I'm hunting specific bottles that the reviews just sound amazing. Now, here in Wyoming, it's difficult to get our hands on a lot of stuff because it always has to go through. We got a couple of problems, right? So we have the state controls liquor. Everything has to go through the state liquor warehouse where they do the taxes and everything like that, which means if somebody wants something specific, if a retailer or a customer wants something specific, so let's say I want this bottle. Okay, I don't know what it would be. Perfect example is the Remus Repeal, right? So I can get George Remus in Wyoming. I cannot get Remus Repeal. Don't know why, because I think those two things go hand in hand, but whatever. If I want that, I have to go to a retailer. The retailer then has to buy or ask the state to bring it in. The state, and so the retailer probably has to contact a distributor. The distributor has to contact the state to bring it in. Now, if that distributor doesn't already have a relationship and is already bringing stuff in, and if they're only looking to bring in one case or whatever it is, one bottle of something, it's not impossible. It's just insanely difficult or time consuming, and there's a lot of people involved, and there's a lot of taxes involved, and just pure frustration. So it doesn't end up happening very often. When you're dealing with a state like Wyoming, which, it used to be 500,000, I bet you we're pushing 600,000 people after the last couple of years, because freaking people have moved here from everywhere. I guess I have to throw my hat in that ring too, because I'm not from here originally. But because of that whole process, it's just not worth it. You're the number of people that you're trying to appeal to is so low that, like, to go through that difficulty is not typically done unless you're on really, really good terms with a retailer somewhere. So because of all that, very difficult to find things around here. So whenever I travel, I tend to keep an eye out for things. My hunting partner back in Wisconsin, or when he goes to Kentucky, I got family in the Midwest and whatever else. I always tell people, like, hey, keep an eye out for stuff. Nobody's really come through for me at the moment, but there's always the off chance that somebody will, show up one day and have done me a favor. But it's kind of like this, Weller 107. Everybody's like freaking out. People pay hundreds of dollars for this Weller 107. It was like $45 or $46 a couple of years ago. This year, my wife picked this up for my hunting partner. It was $49. Or the E.H. Taylor that I have that I always I don't remember if it was $37 or $47, but it was cheap. Go look at that video. And people pay hundreds of dollars for that too. So that's my whiskey journey. Hopefully, you enjoyed kind of the story. I know this one's a long one, 34 minutes, holy cow, and I'm probably not going to edit any of that down. So there you go. Hopefully you stuck with it. Thanks for watching. You guys have yourselves a great day. Catch me in the next video. I'm going to talk about the whiskeys that I will always have a bottle on hand of. And yeah, we'll see how that one goes. All right, you guys take care. We'll catch you in the next video.